family member of. These guys are awesome, and I just have to say that. And my guest tonight is Jim. And Jim, I'm going to ask you if you will pronounce your last name, because I don't like to mispronounce people's names.
Okay, it's Yoxel.
Yoxel, okay. And my co-host tonight, Sue, Miss Chanel, is not with us tonight, but I think Jim and I could probably handle it. But I've been dying to talk to you, Jim. Sue has told me a little bit about you, and I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I've been dying to talk to a shaman, if that's what I can call you. I just think that's so incredibly cool, and I have a couple questions after some people asked me to ask you, but welcome, Jim, and if you want to just, tell me, just about yourself, whatever you can think of, that would be awesome.
Okay. Well, first of all, my name is Jim Wolf Yoxel, and my middle name, Wolf, is actually a adopted family name, a Native American adopted family name, and I've been called Wolf for about 30 years, so I'm going to have you shift from Jim to Wolf. Only my mother calls me Jim nowadays.
So can I call you Wolf?
Yes. Yes.
Because that's cool.
Yeah. So a couple of things. When we talk, first of all, let me share. When we talk to use the word shaman. There's a lot of stuff out there right now. There's a lot of people that so-called practice shamanism and everything. The word shaman really comes out of Siberia and that area, meaning a person that enters into the spirit world and communicates with the spirit world and brings information back to help heal their people. And so it's a little odd kind of word because it's changed over the years, and a lot of people use it. A lot of people practice shamanism in their own spiritual practice. I was traditionally trained, and so sometimes I don't use that word, or I use that word kind of sparingly because what it means to me, I think, is a little different than what is being used out there.
Well, when I hear that myself, when I hear that word or when I've heard that word, I mean, two things that come to mind are one, Native American, right. And the other thing, you do hear that word a lot, and I mean, to me, it's probably thrown around a little bit more like people use. Everyone claims to be a psychic these days.
Right.
And excuse me, I grew up doing psychic work, so it kind of gets on my nerves a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm assuming that shaman, because everyone, a lot of new age stuff has come around.
Right. And it's really different. A traditional shaman has and I'll get into talking about this a little bit as we talk. Traditional shaman is usually somebody within a tribal system that is somewhat separate from the rest of the tribe. They're usually a little weird. Their job is to be able to help do the healing and predictions and stuff like that for the tribe. And of course, nowadays we don't live in a tribal society, so it makes it a little bit different.
Now, but if we were talking about Native Americans way back in the day, before we came and destroyed them all, sorry, just my opinion, but would the shaman of the tribe, were they perceived to be the leader or the higher power of the tribe?
Not so much the leader. Obviously, you had chiefs, and in some of the tribes in this country, they were matriarchal, so you really had the women were more in control than the men were. The chief was
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, the chief was more of a spokesman, especially in some of the eastern woodland tribes that were matriarchal. But the shaman was more like the priest and the healer of the tribe. So a lot of times, if they made some prediction, told the tribe that it was time to move because they were maybe, like in the Plains Indians, they were hunting, whatever, then the tribe would listen to that person because they trusted in their visions and they trusted in their connection to the spirit, what we call the spirit world.
Mm-hmm. Now,
go ahead. Yeah.
Do you? I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Someone who, let's say, does psychic work, or who is a psychic or an empath, or can communicate or get messages from, whatever is beyond this earth plane. Mm-hmm. Would you consider, like, the messages from a shaman kind of like something similar to that?
The difference, just a little tiny bit. The difference is that shaman. So people that, and I've got friends that are in, work in that sort of realm, and they receive messages, and so sometimes we receive messages. But the other thing is a lot of times we do some kind of ritual or ceremony that takes us into the spirit world, not just on the outskirts listening to the spirit world. And that's the real big difference, is actually entering into the spirit world for various purposes, to find out what medicine to give somebody for a healing, or why somebody is sick in the first place. Sometimes people in certain situations have done something where part of their spirit is lost in the spirit world, and so, or if you have somebody that's say doing what would be termed as a vision quest or something like that, we actually enter in the spirit world and connect with their spirit and actually do work on that realm. So we actually leave where we are and go out into the other world. So that's
kind of like an outer body experience, or
a little bit, but very controlled. So there's another realm of, and it's all around us. We just don't know how to. Most people don't know how to access it. So there's this other realm that exists that the term is the spirit world, that is actually another world, and you actually enter into that other world. You're trained how to do that. The part that you have to be careful with is that if you're not trained properly, you can get lost in that other world. And I also work in the mental health field, and so I work with psychologists and psychiatrists and stuff like that. And one of the things is that their terminology is like somebody's had a psychotic break, and our terminology is no, they're part of their soul's lost in the spirit world, and let's see if we can go and get that.
Now, have you ever done that? I'm dying to know, like,
multiple times.
Vision in.
Yeah.
Now, when my questions may seem kind of dumb, but because I like to know, like, detail, because this is so cool. But when you have entered the spirit world, how would you, if you had to describe it, what you felt and saw and maybe smelled, or what you heard, like, how would you, and you had to put it in, like, simple terms to draw someone a picture, how would you describe that?
So it's another world in which you have various kinds of energies and spirits that live over there. So you have people that have obviously passed away and haven't sort of transcended, and so their spirits are over there. You have spirit helpers over there. It's a world like almost what we live in. The other thing is that the energies that we don't normally see, that some people pick up and feel, are very visible and have some power over on that other side of the world. So that's why if you're not trained properly and you get over there, you can call forth or bring forth or run into something that could potentially harm you. And so you have to know how to discern between all that kind of, those two worlds. And
now, would you...
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, what's a good spirit and what's a bad spirit?
Yes.
You don't want to come back over to this side with somebody hanging on to you.
Well, I mean, again, I'm just, because you said that, again, probably not to the level of what you're talking about, but I'm just thinking, like, I went somewhere a year and a half ago, and people had talked about attachments.
Right.
And, I've heard about that my whole life. And honestly, even though I do what I do and I believe what I believe, that was still one of those things that you were like, it was kind of like, yeah, maybe it's in your head kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when I actually came home with an attachment, and it literally changed my behavior.
Oh, yeah.
Like, extremely. So, and I just kind of, I don't want to say, got rid of it maybe 6 months ago.
Right.
And it was actually with the help of I'm trying to remember what she was from, like, New Mexico, and she was, I'm trying to say what she called herself. Certainly not a shaman, but she was very practiced in, getting rid of attachments and negative energy and all that. And what she told me to do, I was a little bit like, oh, this is kind of a pain in the butt. But it was so severe that I really kind of had no choice.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
So I'm just wondering, like, in that attachment was actually two different spirits, because I'd gone to basically, in an abandoned, mental institution. So it was kind of like, spirits that had been here on this earth at one time,
right,
and attached to me. So what kind of energy are we talking? Energy, not of the...
So the other thing is that our thoughts manifest energy on the other side. So all the negative thoughts that are put out actually form some kind of an energy force. And I'll give you a little story. So I do, I'm trained in Native American sweat lodge ceremonies. There was a situation where somebody had a spirit attached to them, what we call a, so we don't separate. In the terminology, I don't separate the word spirit from energy source or whatever. Anyway, I managed to get it out, and within just, so what you do is you do a ceremony with the person, you get it out of the person, you get them out of the sweat lodge, your fire keepers do that, and then you try to send it back into the other world. And the only way to describe what this looks like, and this is a number of years ago, was a sort of a big black kind of blob of energy that had some kind of a intelligence to it. When I built my energy up and called in my helpers to be able to deal with this thing, and was getting ready to try to do what I had been trained. This was one of my first, like, really not so good experiences, I guess. Literally picked me up and threw me on the other side of the lodge. And I have scars on my back, so I landed on the rocks. I mean, I physically was picked up by what this energy was. And that wasn't a person that had passed. That was just a big ball of negative energy.
Now,
level of intelligence.
Do you think that energy was actually a soul or remnants of maybe someone that was on Earth at one time, or something that?
No, I don't know if it was somebody that was on Earth. I think that how I've heard it explained by various elders and other people, and I've done a lot of, I've been in a lot of other countries with some of this stuff, is that it's actually our negative thoughts can actually create an intelligent form of energy that directly affects us if we allow it to come in. Now, most of us are protected by that. I don't want anybody listening, I don't want to freak them out going, oh my good Lord, we've got this stuff running around. There is a veil, and there is a certain level of protection. What happens is it's when people get themselves into situations, and this is with the spirits too, this is like possession or attachments or whatever, is that we get ourselves into situations where that veil becomes that veil of protection is weakened. Some of the things that happen in that, sometimes trauma can do it, very traumatic experience. Opening yourself up to, there's something there, and you don't have the right kind of what we would call medicine power or protection or know how to deal with it. So you open yourself up. So seances sometimes, Ouija boards, people playing around with that stuff can get themselves in a little bit of trouble.
I agree too.
And then the other thing and it was really interesting because I actually grew up Catholic, so that was, that's a whole other story. But one of the things, when I started working with some of my elders, they said the two places, if you want to see the most spirits that are hanging out, waiting to enter into somebody and sort of act their energy out. So we have spirits on the other side that are still acting out, because they didn't complete what they needed to do here. Go to churches and bars. Because it's two places where people open up themselves to the other world. They let down their barriers.
Church makes sense, but I never thought about a bar.
Yeah.
But that makes sense.
Alcohol and drugs will open that door, and a lot of times what happens is, so we have somebody that gets really drunk at a bar, and they completely change their personality and act out, and you go, wow, where did that come from? I've never seen that person before. I've seen this person drink before, but they just got way out of hand. Lots of times that's a temporary spirit possession.
Wow.
Spirit is entered into the person because they have no boundaries and no protection around them.
Now, how do you think that works with, okay, and I ask because I was also raised Catholic, which you'll understand this question, went to the Catholic school and the whole 9 yards. So, as I'm sure your experience, it was like back then, like guilt was drilled into you.
Right.
If you had a negative thought about someone, if you, lied or cheated, or even if it was the most minute thing, I was taught that you were going to burn in hell, which even though as an adult you're like, that's not true, God doesn't do that, or the powers that be don't do that, but that guilt still, hangs on. Now, if someone is walking around with a heavy burden of guilt, do you think that opens you up?
To some extent, yeah, it can. Our emotions are the energy that sort of control our spirits and our souls in a way. Emotion is just energy. I teach this. I work in this field. I'm a spiritual director at a recovery program. And what I talk about is that one of the things is that the whole world consists of energy, and our conscious mind helps control some of that energy. And when we have an emotional feeling inside, it's just a buildup of energy. So that energy can either make us vulnerable to the other side or give us strength in the other side, depending on how we perceive it and whether we let it sort of drag us down or not.
Now, what about someone that, because so many people these days, with depression, anxiety, taking a lot of, prescription medication.
Right.
Because, do you think that affects or maybe makes you a little bit more vulnerable as opposed to someone who's, doing heroin or, something illegal?
No, it still breaks down that barrier to some extent. Now, you got to be real conscientious when you start talking about depression, anxiety, those kinds of things. So we have people where the chemistry of the brain is different. And so clinical depression, clinical anxiety is definitely, part of our world now. And I think there's lots of reasons behind that, and that would be a whole other show probably. But any medications that are taken, a lot of times, if they balance the brain out and they're the right kind of medications, then that person stays stable in it. If they get into where, so if you have somebody that, say, is on some kind of medication and they're taking too much and that part of the brain gets unstable, then they can become vulnerable again. So that's where the elements of addiction kind of come in, into the play. And I think that our society is way over medicated in general.
I agree. I mean, I've certainly dealt with it myself in the past. But I totally agree. I mean, I can't say, I don't think I know maybe two people that aren't taking something or haven't had some kind of addiction of some kind. And
part of it is having to change the way that we think, our environment, our lifestyle, all of that. And, taking, I know that in one of the talks I do, I talked about the fact that, and I did this one night, I watched TV for an hour. I don't watch a lot of TV, but I watched TV for an hour specifically for this purpose, and it took me a couple hours to actually hit it, but I watched 5 commercials that said, if you take this, you don't have to feel that. Because this way, you don't have to feel. And then 2 commercials that were suing the companies that were saying, take this, but we've gotten to the point where we're living in a society that says, don't feel. And yet it's our emotions that keep us healthy.
That makes sense. I never thought about that.
Yeah. The reason that we have pain, emotional pain, physical pain, or whatever, is because it's our soul, our body, which is all encompassing in one. Our emotions, our brain telling us that something's the matter and we need to change something, not to just numb it and block it.
Now, how do you think that works for, say, someone who's really had, severely traumatic or say, a person with autism or something, or that, someone that has a really bad chemical imbalance?
So 2 things. One is that you have to figure out whether it's chemical imbalance. The other thing in shamanic practices is that they look at that the spirit is sick first. And by the spirit being sick, then it manifests down into the emotional and the physical world. Our society looks at the physical or the emotional world as being sick, and sometimes, if you're lucky, they might look at the spiritual part. But in our medical field, it doesn't for the most part do that. And so the idea of somebody having any kind of illness is to look at what's going on spiritually with them, so going in and connecting to them spiritually and trying to find out, is their spirit got some kind of a break in it? Even at birth, does the spirit have a break in it, and there's a purpose behind that? Why is that? And then looking at more of the physical and the emotional, so then is there some chemical imbalance in the brain? It's looking at the whole health care of a human, of a person, much differently when you start looking at it from the shamanic side, because you're looking at the spirit first and figuring out and going in and connecting with the spirit and figuring out what's ill in this, what is the illness on the spirit first. And then is that something that they have brought in with them from birth, or is that something that has happened because of trauma? And then is there some way of working from that perspective of putting those pieces back together for that person, and then out of that comes the emotional and the physical?
It makes total sense. I think about, which is a long story, but years and years ago, I really had, gotten away from the whole Catholic upbringing, just because I don't really feel it's healthy.
Right.
But I became more spiritual. Believed in the higher power, whatever word you want, whether it's God or whatever word you want to put on that. And I've been with too many people when they died, because, working in the health field, to not believe that there is something, after we leave this body. But I really found myself spiritually, and even at the worst time in my life, when my father died very young, I was still so grounded. But over the last few years, I don't really know what's happened, but I've kind of gone away a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And I have noticed a correlation between how I think I used to feel when I was spiritually grounded as opposed to now.
Right.
But it's also kind of odd, because at the same time, my psychic abilities, or whatever you want to call them, have gotten even more stronger, but at the same time, I feel like it's made me open to a lot more negative, too.
Right.
So I think I'm still trying to start searching again for that really solid spiritual side. It's just a matter of I personally don't know where to go, and I'm still trying to figure that out.
One thing that people a lot of times, and of course, obviously, it helps, and to have teachers and elders and all that sort of stuff. But the other side of it is the element of spirituality, the spirit realm, magic. If you want to use that term, I use that term a lot. I'm not in the magic sense of David Copperfield or that kind of thing. But I believe that magic exists in the world. When Native people around the world got into, they needed medicine to heal somebody with. They got a new song that came out. The Sweat Lodge in the Native American ceremony, the Sundance in the Plains Indian ceremonies, those kinds of things all came because they went out into the natural world and spent time in there by themselves praying for that direction, and then trusted in that. And what we do is we don't ever spend time there. We go out, we go and sit under a tree meditate for an hour or something. These guys went out for days sometimes. So did the Buddha, so did Christ. I mean, if you want to take it to a religious aspect, they both went out for time. And that's how that's how the Siddhartha became the Buddha and enlightened, and that's how Christ took on his mantle and became Jesus Christ. And from the 40 days and 40 nights, we don't know how to access that information anymore. Sitting with ourselves is a big part to start with. People say, well, how do I find, God, or how do I find spirituality? First of all, going back to the natural world, paying attention to the natural world, sitting in the natural world. We're the only species on the planet that don't know what we're doing. Tree doesn't say, well, should I grow backwards today, or the squirrels, should I hide my stash for the winter at Walmart or Target? We don't.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. We're the only ones stumbling around wondering, and it's because we're not connected spiritually. We're not taking the time. We're not making that the priority in our life. Everything when you make that
it's not even right.
Everything else comes forward. And I'm not talking religion. I'm talking spirituality.
Right.
You can always take your spirituality into your religion, but you can't always take your religion into your spirituality. So.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I just personally feel that religion, I shouldn't say religion, man has ruined religion.
Right.
But again, you know, that's a whole other subject that.
Oh, yeah.
When you said Buddha, it just makes me think, and did I read correctly that you've done something in Chinese studies?
Yes. Yeah, I spent some time over in China. I've got a martial arts background, Tai Chi. And from a Chinese perspective, Tai Chi. I've done some studying of Chinese medicine, acupuncture, stuff like that, and Qigong and a few other realms like that. So,
I love all that. We adopted our 2 girls from China, and over
adopted from China too. So.
Do you really?
Yeah, I have a boy and a girl from China.
Oh my God, that's so awesome! Awesome to meet a fellow parent.
There you go. That's really neat.
Now, what year did you go over? When?
Let's see. So both kids were adopted when they were 4. Hannah, my daughter, is now 16, so she's been home 12 years, and Dylan is now 12, and he was adopted 4, so he's been home for 8. So there's a number of years.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we went over in 2004, and we adopted our first daughter, Chloe, Xing Chenying. And she was about 10 months old.
Okay.
And we were in Nanchang, and our second daughter we went over in 2006, and she's Wang Luxi, and she was about 10 months old also when we got her. And when we went back the second time, Chloe was about 3, and we opted to bring her with us, and I'm so glad we did, because, like, it was such an interesting journey, and it was a little scary for her,
right? Because
I found that when we were there, and, you know, we were walking around Nanchang, and a lot of the elderly people would come up, and they, you know, I had her in a stroller, and they'd come up and they would start, you know, they would see us being very Caucasian, see Chloe, and obviously, you know, as you probably experienced, a lot of staring and talking and pointing, and so when I was there, both times we went to a Buddhist temple, and the monks did like a little prayer, and they wouldn't let the men come up to the altar, just the mothers with the babies, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Right.
And so I went up there both times, and they gave us a blessing, and it was the most peaceful I think I've ever been in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like, and both times the girls were, you know, fussing and crying because you know how hot it is over there.
Right.
And the minute my feet, while I was holding them, touched the altar, they automatically stopped crying and went dead silent, and just it was so incredible to see. And I remember thinking, if I lived here, you know, it's so peaceful. It was just overwhelming to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know we've kind of gone off the subject a little bit, but
I know. I'm so excited.
My daughter went back. I taught English over there, so my daughter went back for a summer with me when she was 7, and then she went back when we got Dylan, my son. So she's actually been there twice and returned. So
how did she feel? Because we're thinking about going back in a couple of years, you know, waiting for the girls to get to the age where they can remember the experience.
Right. She loved it.
Did she?
Yeah, I have some friends over there that I taught with, and they have a daughter around her age, and they're like sisters, so they still communicate, via internet and stuff like that. My son, that's a trip that we have planned. He wants me to take him back and show him around and travel through China. They're both very involved in their culture still, as far as like within the home sort of thing. We live in a small rural area, so there's a whole lot of other kids around.
But we're very lucky. I tell you, I think the powers that be every day. We have, it's just 20 minutes from our home, a Chinese charter school, Chinese immersion charter school, and it's brilliant. It was like, so they're both, learning Chinese, and, the regular studies too.
Right.
And I think, oh my.
Yeah, it's one of the sad things that we've had to deal with is because we live in a rural area. They go to a charter school, but they're the minority. I mean, I think there's one other girl there's a girl from Vietnam, and I think there's a couple other Chinese kids there now, but, just being engulfed in the culture, just where we live, we don't have that opportunity. So we try to keep it as much alive. Fortunately, I've, got a background in Chinese studies and history and
oh, absolutely.
And martial arts and all that, so we're able to keep it alive to a certain extent.
That's awesome, because so many people that, were in both of our different travel groups didn't really feel the need. They kind of, not saying that I'm right and they're wrong, I don't mean that disrespect, but they kind of had the attitude of, well, they're American now.
Right.
And I thought, my gosh, but they are, but they're Chinese.
They're never,
and their culture is awesome.
They're always Chinese when they look in the mirror.
Yeah, but believe it or not, blonde hair, blue eyes, and I've actually had people say to me, your daughters resemble you so much, and I kind of stand there and go, okay. Right. Maybe it's mannerisms or whatever, and it's funny because some of the kids, and again, they're still young, but the kids, whether they're Caucasian or whatever, ethnic background they are, they don't see the difference, and it's so amazing.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, that's your mom and your dad, and,
Right. I did have a situation where I went when Hannah was young, I went for lunch one day, and all these little girls were sitting around the table, and this one little girl, she looked at Hannah, and she looked at me, and she looked back at Hannah, and she looked at me, and she said, are you really Hannah's dad? And I said, yes. And she looked back, I looked back at me, and she went, she must look like her mother.
Yeah. You can just imagine it in their heads, trying to put two and two together.
Right.
And I had a woman at a grocery store to ask me, oh, your husband must be Chinese. And this particular day, I was not in any mood, and I said, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he's Chinese. They look exactly like him.
Yeah.
Well, that's so cool, but I'll get back on subject because I do tend to ramble. Now, a question that I had a couple of people want me to ask you was about a vision quest. What is entailed in doing a vision quest? Because I know someone that seriously has wanted to do this his entire life, just a minor obsession he has, and he wanted me to ask.
Okay. So part of it is to do it properly, to really understand the process. I usually start working with a person for almost a year.
Oh, okay.
Preparation of doing it. A proper vision quest, at least 6 months. Work with them, get to know them, have them come out to a sweat lodge because the sweat lodge is used in the preparation of a vision quest. And so if you're not familiar with that, you're not comfortable, with the ceremony, and that creates a difficulty. The other thing is that to do a traditional vision quest, you actually get permission from that person to tap into their spirit and to connect with them the time that they're up. So you put somebody up on a mountain, you're psychically, if you want to use that term, or spiritually connected to that person so that you can monitor them. I mean, if that person's up there and they haven't eaten or drank anything for a couple of days and they start having problems, you've got to be able to know that that's going on.
Right.
And work with them so that when their spirit or their psyche and spirit start to get stuck because they're up there and they're having to sit with themselves and they're fasting and they get stuck in a place, your job as the shaman or facilitator to do it properly is to help them move through that, but not going up there and sitting down and having a conversation with them. You do it from the spirit world. And so that's why traditionally if I do a vision quest with somebody, I have to get to know them pretty well.
Right.
And make sure that they are dedicated and committed and that they're comfortable with having me, kind of inside their head a little bit, if you want to use a term.
Now, is it something that you would, or just using a silly example, but say, Joe comes along and he's doing this with you and he has done some really bad things in his life. Say, he's, killed someone or killed cats. I mean, he's just really been a horrible person, but obviously hasn't opened that, told you that.
Right.
Would you pick up stuff like that?
Probably. Yeah.
And do you think that would?
Well, and then you have to. What you do in that situation is you try to. So the work that I would do is then have that part of their spirit information, say, kind of show up and kind of face them, so they would have to deal with that. Because a vision quest is clearing all the energy so you can have a vision for your life. So you can have a vision from the spirit world, from God, from your higher power, whatever term you want to use, to give you direction in your life. And so if you've got a pile of baggage in front of there and you're not dealing with it, that's going to come up for you. And that's what the preparation's for. When you come to a sweat lodge, that stuff starts to come up. That stuff starts to move. And so I might work with somebody for 6 months, and that stuff comes up, and they're going, I'm not dealing with this. They never get to the mountain.
That would make sense, because I think that would put like a big block. It would have to somehow put a big blockage in your soul.
And so, vision questing, sweat lodges, Native American stuff, and a lot of that's become it's not as bad as it was a number of years ago, but it's kind of became a fad for a while. And there was lots of people doing vision quests, and now you can do a sort of a psychological vision quest. You can put somebody up there and they just kind of sit with themselves, and you're not tied in, and you're not working with their spirits. That's different and that's where it gets into the difference between being traditionally trained. I know lots of people that do vision quests and have like vision quest camps and stuff and help put people on. There's, they do it in, I don't think it's Outward Bound, but some of those programs, there are treatment programs across the country that wilderness kind of treatment programs for adolescents and for adults too that put them on a so-called vision quest. And it's for them to be able to sit with themselves and psychologically kind of deal with what's going on with them. That's different than a traditional spiritual vision quest.
Now, back in, before our time, would when you think of that, you always think of the Indians doing peyote and the natural drugs, which kind of made sense because they do, they do open up your mind. Not that I've ever tried it, but it, like LSD, do you think that was really used a lot back then? Maybe.
No.
I mean, no.
Actually, it wasn't. Not in this culture. A little bit was. So here's the thing that people don't understand about that is that, first of all, if a substance was used, it was guided by a shaman or a medicine man that was very well trained. Again, if you take something and you go into the spirit world and you get lost in there, you better be working with somebody who knows how to get you back.
Oh, right.
Okay, because people get lost in there, and that's why you have psychotic breaks and drug addiction stuff a lot of times. And then the other thing is to be able to interpret it to make it real versus you have an experience and it just changes the chemistry of your brain and you have some visions, but it's not real. It doesn't hold on. Those people, it's a cool experience, but it doesn't change their life, and they begin to live their vision for the rest of their life. When you have a real vision, you can't step back from it. It takes you on a journey through the rest of your life. It guides that whole part of it, a proper vision. The medicine people that did use those, and there was a couple things. For instance, the Cherokees in North Carolina used a poisoned toad skin that they would dry and blow up your nose, and it would take you into that realm. Peyote wasn't common in this country. Peyote came out of Mexico, so that wasn't common in this country. It has become, they didn't use, I think there was a couple of tribes that maybe used some mushrooms. Marijuana wasn't common. Of course, LSD was, it's a drug derivative of that. But your medicine person is trained how to help you get there, protect you while you're there, and help you bring you back, and then help interpret what the experience was so that it becomes part of your life. That's different than, and a lot of tribes did not use substances. A lot of tribes did it through fasting and prayer. Now, some of the Plains Indian tribes actually, after a couple of days, if they didn't receive a vision, some of the young warriors would cut the tip of their baby finger off.
Oh, my God.
To get them into that space. Again, they were being guided by medicine people that had them in their protection and everything.
Right.
Lots of people did vision quests and never had visions. That were life-changing kind of things. But a vision, a true vision, and especially, like I said, without substances, you fast for 3 or 4 days, no food, no water, and you're in ceremony, and the person knows what they're doing. A lot of times you go into an altered state. You go into that other world. But somebody needs to be able to be watching over you.
Right, because, I just think, like, I know if I go, all day without having a glass of water, food is one thing, but, like, hydration, I feel that, maybe it's according to people's blood sugar levels and all that, but, you start getting a little, out of it.
Right. So here, so I was a sun dancer for a long time, which is a big ceremony that is done in the plains. I danced with the Lakotas and the Crows, both, more so with the Crows. So we would go, no food, no water, and we'd be dancing. You dance your prayers, okay? So you go up to the center pole, you make a prayer, and you dance that. There's a couple of sun dances out in the middle of Montana that were 110 degrees, no food, no water.
Wow.
When you go down or get hit, what they call get hit by the buffalo, you go into the spirit world, maybe have a vision, maybe just go out in the spirit world. When you really have that spiritual experience, after that, and after you've rested a little bit, you actually get up and you have more energy and you dance stronger on the last half than you did on the first half.
Wow.
That's because you're in that spirit world. You're directly connected. You're drawing energy from the spirit world, not from yourself anymore.
Right.
And so that's the difference between Now, some of those ceremonies have been watered down even within the native tradition, unfortunately. Times have changed. People don't go up and do vision quests where they go without food and water for 4 days, or stay in the arbor for 3 or 4 days. Some of the crow dances, or I know some of the Lakota dances, they go out at the end of the day. They have a little food and water. They go back in. They dance a prayer. It's not the same anymore. So a lot of that's changed based on cultural changes.
Right. Now, what is?
Go ahead.
What's the longest that you have ever been in a state, let's say?
So the longest was I did a 4-day dance. Came out, was handed a bottle of water, and I don't know if it was 8 or 12 ounces, but it wasn't a big bottle of water. And then was guided by my elder, and this was specific for a ceremony that I received, to go back. The driver took me back up in the mountains then after the Sundance, and I fasted another 3 days. So 7 days with one bottle of water. Thought I was, there was a point that I thought I had died.
Oh, my God. I can only imagine.
But the result of that is some of the medicine that I now carry that I used to help people with. So.
Now, did you find that your body, did you have any, or did you experience any physical pain, or do you feel that you were so far into where you needed to be that you didn't feel that anymore?
I didn't feel that anymore. There was one time that I was doing a Sundance, and I hadn't got sort of past the threshold, and it was a really weird feeling because I could feel my kidneys jumping in my back.
Oh my
goodness! Because they were so dehydrated. That was uncomfortable. It wasn't painful, but it was a very bizarre feeling.
Right. Wow.
So
now, are your children? Do they partake in any of this, or?
Yep.
Or do they have an interest in it?
They have a little bit, as they get, my daughter's now 16, so it's not quite cool. Although she talks about it with her friends. Take a drink. She's not afraid. She talks to some of her friends about some of the ceremonies. For a long time, it was hard for her to say, people would say, well, what does your dad do? And she would go, well, he's this spiritual kind of guy, but she couldn't describe it. But they've both been in lots of ceremonies. My son probably in the next couple of years will do a rites of passage.
Oh, cool.
Been in sweat lodges. They've been at sings. They've been around me when I've done healing ceremonies. They also, I usually try to go and do some kind of a fasting to keep myself connected in. I usually do a fast once a year. And sometimes they'll come to me and say, Dad, you're kind of like disconnected. You need to go up in the mountains for a few days. I think maybe they just get rid of me, but so they're very, they're very comfortable and familiar with all of that, and live as close to Earth as they can themselves, and so
that's so awesome, though. I mean, thinking, they're so in tune with so many different cultures. Being from China, and then you introducing this culture to them, obviously I get it. They're young. They don't really grasp how cool that is right now.
Right.
But
I have an older son, and then we have a couple of stepdaughters that have all been through ceremony, and when they get ill or they get sick, they call me, and they'll they want me to do some kind of ceremony or prayers for them or whatever. So they all use it, and they all have their own spiritual path, which is different, obviously, than mine, but they all have they all have a very strong spiritual path, and they're real clear that when them or their kids or something get ill, they'll call up and say, I need you to do some medicine for them or whatever. So they're comfortable.
I'll tell you what, if I live close to you, you'd be the first one I'd be calling up, because I mean I have more faith in that and than I do modern. I mean, modern medicine is good, and it's certainly helped me out in some pretty dire situations, but I mean, for a lot of stuff, 80% of the stuff, I'd be like, Jim, come, just hook me up.
Right. Yeah, but, and how much time are we okay on time?
Yeah, I unfortunately have to wrap it up, and which stinks because I had so many other questions, but maybe if you'd be so kind to come on some other time.
Sure.
And I know Sue would love to be here next time. Coming from her spiritual side, she comes at it from a different angle.
Right.
But if anyone, or if you want or you don't want, if anyone wanted to get in touch with you or get more information, do you have any information how they could do that?
Yeah. So they can, find me on Facebook, or the other thing that they can do is I can give you an email address. It's jwyoxall@hotmail.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if I might contact you in the future with some spiritual issues I have.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, thank you so much. And again, I totally want to have you back. But thank you so much for coming on. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And I'll talk to everyone next week. And that's it for Dawn at Night right now. Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks for inviting me.
Bye.
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 on video or picture or audio form.
Right. Well, it's a nice good trigger sense to have to know when, things are about to happen or things, might be there.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I guess like I've heard, the more you do the paranormal investigations, the more that you're into this, the more attached you are. The longer you do this, the more sensitive you get. That's what I've heard. And since I have been doing this since I was like 15 years old, I have to get more sensitive and more sensitive. And it just, because of that, I mean, it sucks feeling this way when something's about ready to happen. But at least I know that something is trying to communicate with us at that moment to where we can get something around and ready to be able to capture that moment. That's why we have multiple devices to capture whichever way that they're